The wind screamed like a living thing, twisting and rattling the farmhouse shutters with a force that seemed almost supernatural. Outside, the landscape had disappeared beneath a roiling curtain of snow, each flake carried by gusts sharp enough to sting exposed skin. The farm, usually a quiet refuge amidst rolling fields, now looked fragile and vulnerable, a lone outpost battered by the storm. Inside, the farmer stood near the window, hands resting against the cold glass. His breath fogged the pane as he squinted into the white haze, trying to make sense of the chaotic scene. The barn in the distance was barely visible, its dark silhouette distorted by the swirling flurries. He could hear the howl of the wind, a mournful sound that seemed to echo across the empty fields, and the way the snow pounded the roof made his chest tighten with unease. He had lived through many winters, but there was something different about this one. The storm had come quickly, a sudden wall of white that erased the familiar lines of the land. Even the old oak trees, usually resilient, shivered violently under the weight of frost and ice. Snow had already piled against the farmhouse door in drifts taller than a child, and he knew that venturing outside would be foolish, almost suicidal. The farmer's gaze wandered to the small wood stove in the corner, its warm orange glow the only thing cutting through the chill of the room. He rubbed his hands together, feeling the stiff ache of cold fingers despite his thick wool gloves. He thought of the animals in the barn, chickens huddled under the roost, the cows shifting nervously in their stalls, and prayed that they were sheltered enough to survive the night. The snowstorm was relentless, a swirling mass that refused to ease, even for a moment. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, though in the whiteout it was impossible to tell how distant it was. The sky had gone from gray to an opaque white, and the snow fell so thick that it looked like the world was being erased. He imagined the entire valley swallowed under a blanket of ice, the familiar roads and fences hidden under layers of frost. As he pulled his sweater tighter around him, a flicker of unease ran through his mind. There was something almost alive in this storm, a presence that felt watchful, pressing against the farmhouse walls as if testing them. He shivered, not entirely from the cold. Outside, the gusts battered the windows, sending tiny shards of ice sliding down the glass. Every shadow seemed larger, every sound sharper. He could almost hear the snow cracking under some invisible weight, and his instincts told him to stay close to the warmth, to wait for morning. But even as fear gnawed at him, he felt a strange exhilaration. There was a beauty in the raw power of the blizzard, a kind of purity in its wildness. It was terrifying, yes, but it demanded respect. The farmer inhaled deeply, letting the scent of wood smoke and damp earth mix with the cold that seeped through the walls, grounding him in the moment. He knew the night would be long and unforgiving. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to human concerns. And somewhere in the snow-laden darkness, life struggled to endure. Through the storm's white haze, a small shape struggled across the snowdrifts. At first, the farmer thought it was a stray branch or debris tossed by the wind, but as it moved, he saw the unmistakable wobble of tiny legs. A cat. Small, soaked and shivering, its gray fur streaked with frost. Its ears were pinned back, and its wide eyes darted anxiously, scanning for any sign of shelter. Every step was a battle against the relentless wind and deep snow, yet the tiny creature pressed forward, driven by some stubborn instinct to survive. The farmer's heart clenched. How had it gotten out here? How long had it been wandering alone in this merciless blizzard? Without thinking, he pulled on his coat and boots and pushed through the snow toward it. "Hey there," he called softly, careful not to startle it. The cat froze, but did not retreat. Inch by inch it crept forward. The farmer knelt and extended a gloved hand, the warmth of human presence reaching through the cold. A faint, pitiful mew escaped, barely audible over the wind, and he felt it strike straight to his heart. Finally, He scooped the trembling creature into his arms. Its tiny body shook violently against his chest, but it made no attempt to escape, pressing its face into his coat for warmth. The storm outside seemed to fade for a moment as he held the fragile life close, feeling the rapid thrum of its heartbeat. Inside the farmhouse, the cat curled into a tight ball on a blanket near the stove, slowly thawing under the comforting heat. The farmer brushed stray snowflakes from its fur, marveling at the small creature's resilience. Alone in the blizzard it had endured, and now, in this quiet refuge, life had found a foothold. For a long while they sat like that, human and animal, sharing warmth and safety. Outside, the wind howled and snow piled high, but inside, hope and trust had taken root in the simplest of gestures. An open door, a kind hand, and a willingness to care. The storm showed no sign of easing, yet the farmer knew he couldn't leave the tiny cat out in the white chaos. Snow had already formed sharp ridges against the farmhouse steps, and each gust carried the sting of ice against his face. But he forced himself forward. He knelt near the quivering creature, gloved hands extended, speaking in the softest tones. "Come on, little one, it's okay." For a heartbeat, the cat froze, eyes wide and cautious. Then, as if sensing safety, it stepped forward, brushing against his gloves. Its fur, damp and matted with snow, stuck in tufts that shivered with the cold. The farmer scooped it up carefully, cradling its fragile body against his chest. Tiny claws brushed against his coat, but there was no struggle, only trust, fragile yet unmistakable. Inside, the warmth of the farmhouse felt like another world. He set the cat gently on a thick blanket near the stove. Immediately, it curled into a tight, quivering ball, melting slightly under the heat. The farmer brushed stray snowflakes from its fur, marveling at how such a tiny life had endured the storm's fury. For a long moment, he simply watched it breathe, each inhale and exhale a testament to resilience. The cat's timid purr, faint but steady, filled the quiet room, mingling with the crackle of the fire. The farmer felt a swell of relief and satisfaction. In the midst of the blizzard's indifference, he had made a difference. He fetched a small bowl of warm milk, watching as the cat lapped cautiously, each sip reinforcing a bond forged in adversity. This was more than rescue. It was a promise, a silent agreement that the farmhouse would be its sanctuary, no matter the storm outside. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside, a fragile warmth had taken hold. One small act of kindness had transformed the chaos into hope, the fear into trust, and a lonely winter night into a beginning. The blizzard finally began to ease, but winter was far from over. Snow still covered the fields in thick, glistening drifts, and the wind had a sharp bite that reminded the farmer of the storm's recent fury. Yet inside the farmhouse, life had settled into a quiet rhythm. The cat had grown stronger over the past days, its fur slowly drying and fluffing up, revealing a once sleek gray coat now softened by warmth. Each morning, the farmer prepared a bowl of warm milk and a little food, placing it near the stove where the cat could eat in comfort. The tiny creature had begun to explore cautiously at first, sniffing corners of the room and testing the sturdiness of chairs and tables. The farmer noticed small improvements each day. The cat's eyes, once wide with fear, now held curiosity. Its paws no longer trembled with each step, and its cautious purrs had grown confident, echoing through the warm farmhouse. He even found it attempting playful jumps, swatting at loose threads on rugs, and chasing tiny shadows cast by the firelight. Each gesture, no matter how small, felt monumental. The farmer would sit nearby for hours, offering gentle strokes, soft words, and reassuring presence. At night, he would check the blanket by the stove, making sure it was dry and thick enough to keep the cold from seeping in. Outside, the snowfields remained silent and harsh, but inside, the rhythm of care created warmth and security. There were moments when the cat would pause, gaze up at him, and simply sit in silence. Those were the moments the farmer treasured most, silent acknowledgments of trust and gratitude. In the middle of a merciless winter, a bond had formed that transcended words, a connection built entirely on patience, compassion, and perseverance. Even the simplest tasks, feeding, brushing, or letting the cat stretch in the sunlit window, felt like victories. In each act, he witnessed the fragile resilience of life, a reminder that even in the harshest seasons, small gestures could nurture hope and survival. Word of the farmer's small act began to spread, quietly at first, like snow melting in the warmth of spring. Neighbors passing by on the snow-covered lane noticed him leaving food outside the farmhouse, extra scraps, blankets, and bowls of milk. They spotted the tiny gray cat, once shivering and frail, now prowling confidently along the edges of the porch, tail flicking with newfound energy. Curiosity turned into admiration. Children whispered about the brave little creature that had survived the blizzard, and parents told stories of the kind farmer who had taken it in when others might have ignored it. People began to stop by, asking if the cat was okay, offering extra food, or simply smiling and waving from a distance. The farmer, humble and focused on daily routines, barely noticed the growing attention. He continued feeding the cat, checking its blanket and keeping the farmhouse warm. But the ripple of his kindness was spreading, unnoticed at first, until one morning a small group of neighbors arrived, carrying extra blankets, scraps of food, and even toys. "Looks like someone's been very busy keeping this little one safe," one neighbor said with a chuckle, watching the cat bat playfully at a small yarn ball. The cat, emboldened by both warmth and human attention, leapt onto the porch railing, surveying its small kingdom. It was no longer just a creature of survival. It had become a symbol of resilience, a living testament to how a single act of compassion could inspire others. The farmer finally allowed himself a small smile, recognizing what had begun to unfold. The town's quiet attention was more than curiosity. It was admiration, gratitude, and a desire to participate in this shared moment of humanity. He realized then that the blizzard had been cruel, but it had also created something remarkable, a community's awareness of kindness, sparked by one man's choice to act. Even in winter's lingering cold, the warmth of people's hearts was beginning to shine through. The farmer looked down at the cat, now purring confidently on the porch, and felt a quiet satisfaction. In saving this tiny life, he had unwittingly brought others together, and the first threads of a community were weaving themselves around a small, gray survivor. The first hints of spring crept over the horizon like a shy visitor, brushing away the harshness of winter with soft warmth and pale sunlight. Snowbanks that had dominated the landscape for months began to shrink, trickling into muddy rivulets and revealing the long-buried earth beneath. Patches of green pushed through the thawing soil, tiny promises of renewal, and the air carried the faint, sweet scent of wet grass and budding flowers. Inside the farmhouse, the cat had transformed. Its fur was thick and glossy, gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The once shivering creature now moved with confidence, padding around the room with a spring in its step, tail held high. Every corner of the farmhouse had been explored, from the loft above to the kitchen hearth below. It leapt gracefully onto windowsills, chasing dancing specks of dust and the occasional sunbeam with a joy born from safety and warmth. The farmer watched quietly from his chair, coffee cup in hand, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. The bond they had forged through the winter had grown stronger with each passing day. He remembered the night he had rescued the tiny creature from the blizzard, the fragile body trembling in his arms. Now it was vibrant and alive, a living testament to resilience and care. But the farm was no longer just a sanctuary for one small survivor. Word of the cat's recovery had traveled throughout the town, and people had begun to visit with offerings of food, blankets, and small toys. Children laughed as the cat chased sticks and feathers, while adults stood nearby exchanging stories and gratitude with the farmer. The once quiet farmhouse had become a hub of connection, a place where kindness had multiplied into community. The cat, sensing the change, approached the visitors with curious confidence. It rubbed against their legs, accepting pats and soft words without fear. Each interaction was a small miracle in its own right, a bridge built between fear and trust, between solitude and companionship. As the day stretched into evening, the sunlight softened, painting the farm in warm hues of gold and amber. The cat perched on the fence, surveying the fields that had once seemed endless and forbidding in winter. The farmer stood beside it, arms crossed and heart full, marveling at how the simple act of rescue had unfolded into something far greater than he could have imagined. Outside, the air was alive with the hum of spring, birdsong, dripping water, and the rustle of new leaves. Inside, the farmhouse hummed with warmth, laughter, and the contented purrs of a tiny survivor. The season had turned, the storm had passed, and life, small, fragile, and beautiful, was thriving once again. By mid-spring, the farmhouse was no longer a quiet, solitary place at the edge of the fields. The story of the rescued cat had spread through the town, carried by whispers, friendly visits, and the laughter of children. Neighbors began arriving not just to see the cat, but to participate in its care, bringing food, blankets, and small toys, each contribution a gesture of kindness. Children ran across the yard, tossing yarn balls and sticks for the cat to chase. The once timid creature now darted confidently between their legs, leaping onto tree stumps and porches with agility and playful curiosity. Adults lingered, smiling at the scene, sharing stories of small acts of compassion they had witnessed in their own lives. The farmhouse, once isolated, had become a hub of community, a symbol of the way a single act of care could ripple outward. The farmer leaned against the porch railing, quietly watching the activity, a soft smile tugging at his lips. He had never imagined that rescuing a single cat in a blizzard would lead to this, a network of people united by small kindnesses, their hearts warmed by the story of survival. The cat, now fully confident, was the bridge between him and the town, its playful energy inspiring laughter and connection. Neighbors also began contributing in practical ways. One brought an outdoor shelter so the cat could rest safely in the yard. Another delivered extra food, ensuring it would never go hungry. A few stayed to sweep the floors and tidy the farmhouse, leaving space for the cat to explore freely. Each act reinforced the sense that the community had become part of the cat's story, invested in its well-being. As the afternoon sun began to soften, casting long golden shadows across the yard, the cat paused, curling against the farmer's legs for a moment of affection. It purred, a gentle vibration that seemed to echo the gratitude and joy of the people gathered around. The farmer realized that what began as a small act of compassion had blossomed into something far greater, a shared experience of empathy, connection, and the quiet power of caring. By evening, the farmhouse radiated warmth, not just from the stove, but from laughter, conversation, and a sense of belonging.
Spring had fully arrived, painting the farm in vibrant greens and golds. The cat, once frail and shivering in the blizzard, now darted across the yard with playful energy. Tail held high, ears twitching at every sound. The farmhouse, once a quiet refuge, had transformed into a gathering place, alive with laughter, conversation. In the gentle rhythm of shared humanity, neighbors began to arrive early that morning, carrying homemade treats, blankets, and toys for the cat. Children ran ahead, scattering petals and sticks, calling the cat to chase them. Adults followed, smiling and greeting each other, forming a circle of warmth and camaraderie. The farmer stood on the porch, arms crossed, smiling quietly. Overwhelmed by the generosity and unity that had grown from one small act of kindness. "Look at him go," shouted a child, tossing a small ball for the cat. It pounced with precision, rolling the ball across the yard before darting to chase it again. Laughter erupted, spreading like sunlight across the gathering. Neighbors exchanged stories comparing their own small rescues, acts of compassion, and experiences with winter hardships. Each tale seemed to weave them closer together. A tapestry of empathy and connection, strengthened by shared presence. Some townspeople had brought practical gifts. A family carried a small, insulated outdoor shelter so the cat could nap safely in the yard. Another group brought extra bowls of food and fresh water, arranging them carefully along the porch. Others helped tidy the farmhouse and sweep the floors, creating space for the cat to explore without risk. Every contribution, no matter how small, became part of a collective effort that celebrated survival, compassion, and community. The cat, now confident and playful, became the symbol of it, all its every leap and playful swipe a reminder of resilience and trust. Children stroked its fur, adults watched and smiled, and the farmer felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. What began as a quiet act of rescue had rippled outward, touching lives and hearts beyond what he could have imagined. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the sunlight softened, painting the farm in golden hues. The cat perched on the fence, surveying the yard as if acknowledging all who had gathered. The people lingered, sharing food, conversation, and quiet laughter, united by the story of a tiny creature who had survived the storm. In that moment, the farmhouse was more than a home. It was a sanctuary, a hub of compassion, and a living testament to the extraordinary ways one small act of kindness could transform an entire community. Night fell gently over the farmhouse, and the celebration had quieted. The laughter and chatter of neighbors faded into soft conversations as families slowly made their way home. The golden sunlight had given way to the cool, silver glow of twilight, and the farmhouse stood serene, surrounded by fields now green and alive with spring's promise. The cat, now tired from the day's excitement, curled up on the porch railing, eyes half closed, ears twitching occasionally as if listening to the faint sounds of the farm. The farmer settled beside it, hands resting gently on the soft fur. He marveled at how far the tiny creature had come from a shivering, frostbitten kitten lost in the blizzard to a confident, playful presence who had brought an entire community together. He thought back to the night of the storm. The icy wind whipping against the farmhouse, the snowdrifts piling higher than he could have imagined. He remembered the fear and uncertainty, the fragile body trembling in his hands. How could such a small life, so seemingly insignificant in the vastness of the world, spark this chain of connection, warmth, and compassion? The cat purred softly, leaning into his touch, and he realized that the answer lay in trust. In accepting help, in trusting him despite fear, the tiny creature had given back far more than he could have anticipated. Its survival had reminded everyone, himself included, that even in the harshest conditions, life endured and kindness multiplied. From the porch, he could see the subtle signs of the town's involvement: the outdoor shelter, the scattered toys, the tidy spaces prepared by neighbors. Each small gesture was a reflection of shared humanity. The way people could come together when moved by empathy and a desire to help. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the cat, but for the community that had responded so generously. For a long while, he sat in silence, listening to the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the distant calls of birds returning to their nests, and the steady purr of the cat at his side. Life had returned from the storm in a way that was gentle yet powerful, fragile yet enduring. Finally, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, he whispered softly to the tiny survivor beside him. "You've done more than survive. You've reminded us all what matters." And in that quiet moment, the farmhouse felt complete, a sanctuary for life, a testament to compassion, and a place where the warmth of a single act of kindness had grown into the enduring glow of an entire community.